This screencast describes what project-based learning would look like in my classroom. A project that I currently do in my classes is the study of Spanish-speaking countries. Students choose a country, a Spanish-speaking country, that they would like to visit in their lifetime. They research the country, then write a report and create a presentation to present to the class. The report and presentation includes cultural information about the country, such as typical food, way of life, customs, traditions, celebrations, music and dance, art, etc. Also, the students tell the activities they are going to do during the trip. This section is written in Spanish, and they demonstrate the language skills, vocabulary, and grammar they learned in class. They also compare one aspect of the country with their own. The guidelines I give say the report should include a map to show the location of the places they want to visit, and a rubric that states how the project will be graded. And these are the criteria I use for grading. 25 points each for content, presentation, written work, and originality and creativity, which I have to say is hard to define. I think this project went very well last semester. The students learned content about the Spanish-speaking country. They created beautiful PowerPoint presentations, and they used their language skills to communicate with the audience about the activities they are going to do during the trip. Additionally, the project met several of our core learning outcomes we have for the course, which say students will understand the historical, geographical, and economic features of Spain and Latin America. Students will be able to understand and value cultural differences through the study of Spanish. Students will be able to read, speak, and understand elementary Spanish structures. Students will understand the educational value of communicating in another language. And finally, they will realize that language acquisition is a lifelong process. Overall, I thought it was a successful project. The students learned a lot, and they did a great job of presenting their projects. However, after watching the videos and reading the text from this week's module on project-based learning and promoting activity or creativity in the classroom, I have a better idea of how this project could be transformed into a project-based learning activity. Wolpert Gogram gives this definition of project-based learning. She says that it is an ongoing active learning about different subjects simultaneously. This is achieved by guiding students to identify through research a real-world problem, developing its solution using evidence, and presenting the solution through a multimedia approach based in a set of 21st century tools. And then she goes on to give her definition. She said that project-based learning typically is grounded in the following elements. And you can see there her list of elements that she gives for project-based learning. Here, one thing I could do to transform my current project into a project-based learning activity is I could incorporate a few key components of project-based learning. First thing I could do is add the component of bringing real-world expertise into the classroom by having individuals from the Spanish-speaking countries visit our classroom and talk to my students about their country. Using this authentic project, it will promote student engagement and interest. Students will be actively learning about the content by interviewing the person from that country. And therefore, the content will have more meaning versus just reading material from books or websites. They would get the information firsthand from personal experience. This is from the person they interview. You can see here a quote that says that students find project work more meaningful if they conduct real inquiry, which does not mean finding information in books or websites and pasting it into a poster. I'm afraid that my students are doing some of that and they're not really having a real inquiry, a real authentic experience as far as gathering the information. Also, the project-based learning activity that I would transform would establish real-world connections. And according to the video, establishing real-world connections, students are more engaged when learning relates directly to the world they live in. By interacting with people from other countries, the project could be expanded beyond the classroom walls, and the students would have a more personal connection with the person from the country they are studying. I think that would do a lot to really transform my activity into a project-based learning activity. You can see another activity, another example of project-based learning and learning that's extended beyond the classroom walls in the video that describes the collaboration with local museums and community organizations that the Norma Park students do to make real-world connections to the curriculum. And this video shows how learning takes place beyond the classroom and beyond the textbook. To further my current project into a project-based learning activity, I could add the component of an authentic audience by inviting other professors or members of the community to our classroom to hear the students' presentations. And as you can see from the quote, that schoolwork is more meaningful when it's not done only for the teacher or the test. When students present their work to a real audience, they are more careful about its quality, and they're more engaged, and they learn better. Technology, what I could use for technology in my project. Technology is a very powerful tool, and one way we could use the technology is my students could use it to connect with people from the countries that they're studying, people from the countries that they were studying that might not be able to come to our classroom or school, or that my students can't reach. Skype, for example, would be one way that my students could interview people who are at other locations other than our school. They could even interview people living in other countries. In fact, several years ago in my class, in one class, I had a guest speaker from Spain. Actually, she visited my classroom via Skype. And I saw how this authentic experience and real-world connection really engaged my students. So I think I have some great ideas about project-based learning that I could implement into my class to make my students' experience more meaningful.